Wires? Sam was a little disappointed. She watched as Adam returned to his room from fucking Zena, and all he did was flop onto his bed and sleep. He didn't even remove his boxers. Mommy had worn him out. Boo. There's no point, said Luke. He won't wake up for hours. I'm going to go out and see Mom and get some breakfast. Shrugging her agreement, Sam joined her brother as they left the room and walked to the kitchen. Zena was up, making herself a coffee when the kids arrived. Hi kids. What have you been up to? She inquired in a cheery voice. Oh, just playing and looking at dumb people on the net, was the answer she heard. Listening to you fuck Adam, was the answer he wanted to give. The kids grabbed a bowl of cereal for themselves. Zena sat with them at the dining table, sipping her coffee as they ate. Luke, seated side-on from his mother, could clearly see her nipples through her flimsy singlet top. Tits were the one thing he missed with Sam. He could play with her pussy and anus, but her chest was as flat as a boy's. When breakfast was done, Luke rinsed his own and Sam's dishes, then waited while his mother gulped down the last of her coffee. He took her cup and rinsed that too. Sam was slow to rise, but once she was up she announced that she was going back to her room to watch more idiots on YouTube. Luke knew, full well, that the only idiot she would be watching was asleep down the hall. He let her go anyway. Zena had moved to the sofa and had started watching one of the news channels. Luke joined her and snuggled up close to his mom. After a time he moved to lay on the sofa with his head in his mother's lap. He wasn't interested in the news, so lay with his nose to her belly. Zena was wearing just her normal singlet and French panties, so only a single layer of thin fabric separated Luke's nose from his mother's pussy. He nuzzled in and drew all his breath through his nose. She was still wet from fucking Adam and he could smell the combination of sweat and pussy juice. Zena noticed as her young son reached down and adjusted his pants. Zena stroked his head and tried to turn his nose away from her cunt. She was already having sex with one son, best to try and deter the second. Luke allowed his head to move. He could still smell her anyway. Looking up at her from her lap he could see the outline of her nipples again. He reached up, took the front of her singlet and whispered to his mom. Can I have a look? I haven't seen them for ages. Zena just nodded. Slowly Luke lifted the singlet away from her belly so he could look up inside from her lap. He saw the round underside of both her breasts and the large, erect nipples still touching the inside of her singlet. He gazed up at them for a minute or so then laid the singlet back down. Zena felt the, now free, hand slide up her stomach and chest before it gently cradled one of her tits. Mother and son lay there for the rest of the news, she pretending to watch, as her boy played with both her breasts. Zena glanced down to see that her gentle, beautiful boy was making no attempt to conceal the boner poking out of the leg of his shorts. Both of them were wondering how this little situation was going to end. Luke was happy to stay there forever, a tit in his hand, juice slowly oozing from his cock. It was Zena that broke. Lucy and your father will be home soon. We haven't much time, but come to my bedroom and I'll sort that out. With her last words Zena reached down and touched the boy's penis. Luke rolled away and watched as his mother rose from the sofa and walked away. Luke jumped to his feet, boner still poking out of his shorts, and ran after his mother. She was waiting inside the door and shut it after him. He heard the lock snap shut behind him. He stood in the middle of the room and turned to face her. I'm sorry Mom. I didn't mean for it to get big. He begged. It just that your boobies felt so good. Luke used the childish word for her breasts. He felt it reinforced the innocent tone he was trying to exude. Zena was already seated at the foot of the bed, her legs spread a little. She beckoned her boy. Come here, she said, pointing to the floor between her knees. And I don't want to make a habit out of this. We just can't have you walking around with that thing waving about. Luke walked up to her and stood between her legs, cock poking out at his mother. She pulled his shorts to his knees and let them fall to the floor. She sat for a moment looking at her half-naked boy, before taking a hip in each hand to steady them both. He watched as his mother leaned forward and swallowed the entire length of his tool. His shirt was getting in the way of his view, so he quickly hauled that over his head and discarded it on the floor. His mother wasn't wasting any time. She knew they only had a short time before Martin and Lucy would come home and spoil the show. Luke reached down and touched his mother's face, pulling his cock from her mouth. Zena was a little surprised that he wanted to stop. Luke had other ideas. He reached down and grabbed the bottom of his mother's singlet on both sides and lifted it up to expose her breasts. And he didn't stop there. As he kept tugging at it, Zena finally got the idea and raised her arms above her head. The loose-fitting singlet came off her easily. Luke tossed it on the bed and shoved his hips forward again, his cock proudly standing in front of her face. She went down on him again. Luke watched, and each time she pulled away from him, he saw her tits dangling and swaying in the gap between her face and his balls. Zena worked her boy hard and fast. She had never had a cock this small in her mouth before, and it was kind of cute. She could work the entire length of his cock. She could push it until her nose touched the small tuft of his fresh-grown pubic hair. Luke knew he should warn his mother before he blew, but that might give the game away. Instead, right near the end, he started to fuck her face, pushing hard into her as lost his load. Once he had drained himself in her mouth, Luke backed off and looked at her. Holy shit, he thought. He looked at her bare breasts, the juice from his cock still on her lips, and contented smile on her face. I just blew mom. Get your clothes on and disappear, young man. She ordered ... And as I said before, we are not going to make a habit of this. She paused as he picked up his clothes ... And I don't need you to go telling anyone either. This is between you and me. Okay? Okay, Mom. I promise. He too paused before he remembered his manners ... And thanks. That was really great. Luke didn't wait for an answer. He unlocked the door and slipped out into the hall, closing the door behind him. The next second he was on tiptoes, running back to his room. He burst in, surprising Sam a little. With the door firmly shut behind him, he finally spoke. You are not going to guess what just happened. Luke and his mother had been lucky. The long kiss in the locker room was the only thing that saved them from an inconvenient, and potentially disastrous, walk-in. Lucy and Martin arrived home to an empty house. The TV was still on, but the rest of the family were all in their rooms. Lucy went to the laundry to empty her gym bag while Martin did some exploring. He found Zena in there en suite. She had just freshened up after blowing Luke and was still on the toilet, peeing when Martin found her. Lucy had a great session today. 2 new PBs. She is really doing well. That's fantastic, darling. I'll be out in a second and you can both tell me all about it. Zena wiped her pussy, mopping up the pee and the juice she made while blowing Luke. After she had flushed, Martin took her place and emptied himself. His cock was still tingling, his balls still sore, from Lucy's blowjob. Martin changed and they both went out to find their children. Lucy had created enough noise to wake Adam, so he rose to join them all. Sam, still shocked by Luke's news, and the boy himself were already out watching TV. Zena made them all lunge as Lucy told the story of her new achievements on the track. Funnily enough, she made no mention of the new PB she set in the locker room afterwards. Sam was intent on seeing Adam's cock. She sat by Luke's PC, half watching the screen, half drawing. Sam was a budding artist and spent much of her free time sketching and painting. She didn't have to concentrate much on the screen as Adam was sitting on his bed, curtains drawn, listening to music through his headphones. The only reason she knew he was still in the room was the blue LED on his earpiece. The light in the bathroom flickered on, throwing a shaft of light into Adam's room. Sam caught the flicker out the corner of her eye. Lukey, something is happening. Luke wandered over to the screen to join Sam. That's interesting. The door is part way open and Lucy's not closing it. She probably doesn't know Adam is there. He's sitting in the dark on his bed. Sam and Luke watched through the bathroom door and saw Lucy walk to the toilet and sit. Luke judged by the amount of dark skin that Lucy as either naked or just wearing panties. It didn't matter. Once she was seated she would be naked. They watched as the blue LED rose from the bed and moved towards the light. Only when he was just a few feet from the door did enough light strike his dark body to allow the watchers to see him. He stood by the door and peeked inside. He wasn't going anywhere, he just stood there and kept watching his sister. Lucy didn't move either. She's sitting there a while, Luke remarked. Probably rubbing one out. Sam replied. Luke turned and looked at his little sister, mystified. Rubbing out one, masturbating ! That's what she calls it. So how come she doesn't see Adam? She has a habit of closing her eyes ... so she can concentrate on her fantasies. Sam added. I've seen her do it. Adam continued to watch Lucy, and Sam watched him. Look! He's getting a boner! She exclaimed, pointing to the tent in the front of her brother's boxers. As they watched, Adam reached into his shorts and hoisted his cock and balls over the top of the waist elastic. Sam was elated. Finally. I've been waiting hours to see that. Adam had not extracted his tackle for Sam's benefit. He didn't know she was watching. He pulled it out to jack off. Sam watched, mesmerized, as Adam rubbed his shaft up and down. He was about 7 feet from the camera, so she missed very little. She saw the outline of his head, she saw the wet skin reflecting the bathroom light, and she saw the bulge of his scrotum and balls hanging below. And he kept right on pumping. "Look at that!" Sam exclaimed again, pointing to the image of his cock on the screen. Luke saw that Adam had not thought this through. Where was he going to squirt when he came? As if to answer Luke's unspoken question, Adam leaned back out of view and returned with something bunched in his other hand. Luke couldn't make it out but guessed it was a pair of jocks or something like that, anything that would contain his load. He went back to his spot and continued watching Lucy, and Sam continued watching him. Suddenly all hell broke loose. Adam peeled away from the door and leapt for his bed. Luke and Sam watched as Lucy's profile appeared in the doorway, pushing the slider fully open. Light flooded into the room. They see her, partly lit, partly in silhouette, standing in the doorway, mouthing off at Adam. Luke wished at that point he had bought the camera with a microphone. Still yelling, Lucy was pointing to the floor in front of her. Luke wondered if their mother's command gestures would work in this case. They did. Soon Adam appeared and stood before his sister. He had managed to poke his tackle back into his shorts, but that just meant his boner made another tent. Lucy walked a step closer to her big brother and punched him solidly in the chest. Then again. And again, and again. She kept going until she had vented her anger on him in a volley of punches. And all the while she was still stark naked. Adam stopped her by moving in closer and throwing his arms around her in a bear hug, preventing her from flailing her arms around. They stood there a while until the bear hug turned into a regular hug, and Lucy was still. "Holy crap. He got caught," was all that Luke could say. And I had finally gotten to see his cock. Adam and Lucy had moved on. Luke could see they were still in a heated discussion. Lucy was gesticulating madly, Adam was trying to soothe her. At one point it must have dawned on Lucy that she was having the discussion naked. She pointed to herself then gave Adam another hefty punch. Adam's response surprised Luke, and delighted Sam. He stripped off his boxers, pointed to himself, and just stood there. They could see Lucy laughing. She grabbed her brother and hugged him, not seeming to mind the erection poking her in the stomach. Sam and Luke both secretly hoped that this would turn into sex. They were both surprised when it did not. After a little more chatting and gesticulating, Lucy went off to her room, and Adam to his bed. Sam and Luke feared they might not see any more nudity. They were wrong. For the rest of the week the bathroom door was not closed again. Luke suspected Lucy's door was open too. He even sent Sam in there to check, and it was. Sam saw a lot more of naked Adam. He seemed to ditch his boxers as soon as he got to his room. They even saw a lot more of naked Lucy. She would come to Adam's side and chat to him, standing naked in the doorway. They were even sharing the bathroom a lot more. They would see Adam go and pee while Lucy was in the shower, and vice versa. By the end of the week Luke and Sam were convinced the other two were doing what they had done weeks ago. Show each other their nakedness, come to terms with it, and move on. They both wondered whether moving on would include sharing the shower, or their bed, as they had done. They discussed leaving the camera in Adam's room, or perhaps moving it back into Lucy's room. Luke had another idea for it. He wanted to hide at their parents' room. Before the weekend Luke managed to get a couple of chances to slip into their room to look for a hiding place. It was going to be difficult. Zena and Martin kept their bedroom rather Spartan. There were no year-old piles of junk where he could hide his camera. It was on his second risky visit that he spied the pelmet above their curtains. He risked a third visit early Friday afternoon to work out how to attach the camera and to calculate his angles. He was prepared, he just needed to find, or make, a 15-minute time slot to do the install. They knew that they could retrieve the camera from Adam's room while he and their mother were fucking. That part was easy. They also worked out that Adam would go and crash straight away afterwards. They just needed to distract their mother for a while, and that would be Sam's job, as Luke would need to do the install. It was a tricky ask. She had to distract her for at least 15 minutes. She had to make sure her mother could not see Luke entering or exiting, so that meant keeping her away from the living kitchen area. "I know. I'll get Mom to come to our room for a girl talk," Sam exclaimed. Girl talk. Luke wasn't sure exactly what Sam proposed. Yeah. Girl talk. And as she spoke, Sam pointed to her vagina. "Oh. That might work." That would give you the excuse to order me out of the room. Could you keep her busy for 15 minutes? I'll have to think of things to ask her. She paused. You know how we are worried about me starting my periods while we are still fucking? Yeah. Luke knew Sam was not about to spill the beans to their mother, but wondered where this was going. Well, I'll tell Mom I'm really worried about it happening at school. I'll ask her lots of questions about it. Like what it will feel like, will I get any other warnings, stuff. Who knows? She might tell me something that helps us not make a baby. Speaking of which, it was Friday evening and Luke had something on his mind. He stripped naked and jumped into his bed, holding the covers open for his clever kid sister. She rid herself of her singlet and panties in 2 quick motions, joining her brother under the covers. They went over the plan a few more times, all the while joined below the waist, cock wed firmly in tiny cunt.